Hello and welcome along to 101 Part-Time Jobs, the only podcast in the world where I speak to bands and artists and musicians of all kinds about what they've done to get by, but be rest assured, legitimate and law-abiding vocations only. I'm so excited to have Ian Farmer to the show. Ian played bass in Modern Baseball for a few years before Slaughter Beach Dog, which is the band he's in now with Jake Ewald, also from Modern Baseball. Their new record, At the Moonbase, came out the day before Christmas, and it's an absolutely phenomenal listen. Behind this, you're listening to a modern lay from the record, which my head is just spinning over. This is an amazing, amazing track. So go well, cheers, thank you for listening. If you enjoy this podcast, please don't be shy to tell a friend that it exists. Sorry, yeah, I'm just going to take this.
Yeah, it's Tracy. Have you listened to 101 Part-Time Jobs podcast? Because it's really good. You should listen to it.
Yeah, sorry about that. Bit rude, isn't it? But that is exactly the kind of camaraderie that I'm talking about. In fact, if you want your 101 Part-Time Jobs recommendation to a friend on one of these intros, then get in touch. Send me your recommendation. Send me your voice note to a mate, and I'll put it in the intro of a future episode. This could go horribly wrong, couldn't it? Anyway, back to business. Thank you to Signature Brew for being the official beer of a podcast. What does that mean? I'm not sure. But thank you for them. You can go onto their website, signaturebrew.co.uk. If you live in the UK, you can get beers delivered directly to your door, which is something that I would suggest in these trying, unprecedented bell-end times. And if you use the voucher code 101podcast, all capital letters, you can get 10% off your order. All right, here's Ian Farmer from Slaughter Beach Dog and the Metal Shop Recording Studio in Philadelphia, United States, on 101 Part-Time Jobs podcast. So you're a business owner, which makes you a pretty excellent person to speak to for this podcast. So the Metal Shop started up when?
The Metal Shop, we first got the space in May of 2015. And then we officially got it to a place. We spent about half a year building it up whenever we weren't on tour, which was not very often. And we officially opened our doors in January of 2016. So that is around the time that we first started actually making records out of here.
And how did it sort of, what was your sort of journey? Was it a smooth journey of building it up and becoming, like a business, like, getting registered and tax registered, all that stuff?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up because
you have no tax.
Well, we haven't. We've been, you're running a small business, especially one like this. We haven't actually made any money, so we haven't owed the government any money, but we still have to file taxes every year because we opened the business just around the time that, or soon after Modern Baseball really got legit with these things, and Jake, who had taken care of these things with Modern Baseball, decided, okay, well, we're opening a business, so we need an LLC, and he got us an LLC before we ever even opened our doors. So it was really funny when we had basically no income to report, but we still had to file taxes, and there was even a year where we didn't even know we were supposed to. So we didn't. And you just kind of have to find these things out as you go. You talk to an accountant, you're like, yeah, so, this is the first time that we made X amount of money. And they're like, well, what about last year's taxes? And we're like, oh, well, we, basically didn't make not even net, gross. We basically didn't even make a dime. And they're like, you still have to tell the government that you did that because you're on the books.
I'm Giles Bidder Limited because I had to make myself a company to be paid for this last job that I did last year.
Yep.
And it's the same. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing and I can't afford an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
So Jake was the business guy in Modern Baseball. I guess before we get onto that, I think before we became friends and before we started hanging out and doing, and we made that great Cynics record Posse together, and you're an excellent engineer and brilliant person to have around. I knew you'd produced some of the early Modern Baseball stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. That's kind of how I joined the band. I was thinking about it recently, and I don't think that ever really clicked with me. But it,
What do you mean it didn't click with you?
well, because we were basically, I mean, Jake and I and Eric were attached at the hip our first year of college where we all met. So it felt kind of just like an extension of that. But Jake and I were incredibly eager to get into the studios any way we could. So we asked for special access, and we were allowed, in the shittiest studio, we were allowed to record there from 11 p.m. to 11 a.m. And it was like, great. Jake and his friend Brendan, who I had hung out with like once or twice before, had this band, and they have a record that they're looking to make. So we can do this. And I had, not much more, but I had a little bit of experience recording before. I had never like tracked any records or anything like that, but I interned at a local studio in the middle of New Jersey somewhere that didn't really do anything other than like hard rock bands and butt rock and stuff. It's an interesting time. Yeah. And so I came along, and we basically just spent, at that point they had actually tried to put together a live band where Eric, who became our manager, and he put out our first record also. He was actually the first drummer, and then our friend Ben, who also played in a band called Marietta, was playing bass. But that didn't end up really working out, and Ben ended up leaving the band, and they had to talk to Eric and be like, listen, I think you're probably more valuable to us as like a manager, because you're really eager to do that kind of thing, and that gets you excited. And Sean is better at drums and has a van, and we kind of have to ask him. And so they did. And it, for me, I just kind of, I don't even know how much it was talked about, but I just kind of fell into it because we were making the record. We were around each other all the time. Music was basically 100% of what we were talking about anyway. And I had a bass. I had played bass in a band in high school. So I just kind of started playing with them. And then next thing I know, I'm actually part of the band. And kind of same with Sean. He kind of fell into it also. But
I think it's so magical, and I feel like you get this sense of it, even if you don't necessarily know it already, with modern baseball, is that not only were you smart, not only did you have lightning in the bottle from the first recordings,
yeah,
but you were just so young.
Yeah, I guess I think I turned 19 while we were recording Sports. Yeah, that sounds about right. So yeah, it all happened very fast before we knew anything, before we knew what was happening.
I mean, when that's as everyone knows who has kind of ridden something magical like that, you can't really see it for what it is at the time. How do you look back on that now, having been able to like ruminate it and speak to your friends and family and whoever about it? How do you see it now?
It's really funny because at the time when it was happening, basically I knew in my brain logically that this is once in a lifetime. This is absolutely bonkers. Like, this shit ain't happening ever again. And I also knew, because I was such like an introvert music head growing up in high school, or really kind of, as long as I can remember, I just knew the trajectory. Band gets too big too fast, it inevitably implodes. And I remember having a discussion with a friend coming home from our first tour, or like our first full US tour. And at that point, we had already recorded You're Gonna Miss It All. Sports had blown the hell up out of nowhere. And we knew that we were totally on the up and up and up. And we packed out Golden Tea House. And it was, I think, at that show that I was talking to my friend, Mike. And I was just like, dude, I can tell, like, I know already this, who knows how long this is going to last. So I better just enjoy it and take it in now and be grateful for it. And then, fast forward just a few years, I guess it was, 3 years. And then we were now having discussions of, well, I guess we kind of have to take a break from this. And I kind of saw it coming, but even when it did, I had no idea. And now looking back on it, it's kind of like, yeah, that was an absolutely crazy thing. And it has set me up to do everything else that I do in my life. So I'm incredibly grateful for it. And really, once again, just can't expect that, level of anything will ever happen to me again.
I mean, I kind of guessed it, but did what you made through Modern Baseball that built the metal shop, did it?
Yeah, entirely. And even to this day, because to be entirely honest, like, the way the metal shop has gone through many phases, phases where I've tried desperately to make it like a legitimate, business that I can live off of, and, trying to make ourselves professional because that's what you're supposed to do. And times where it was simply just the Modern Baseball practice space where Ian and Jake made records when they were home from tour. And, now what it's really morphed into is it is like kind of the Slaughter Beach Dog practice space and home studio that we also, when we're not doing that, I'm, usually making records for other people. And so now really our only goal, we're incredibly we've always been incredibly fortunate. Like I said, the Modern Baseball really started and took off when we were 19 years old. But even to this day, that's still kind of the money that I live off of, which is great because that means that, that and Slaughter Beach Dog combined. So now, with this studio, every cent that I make can go towards making the rent. So it's way easier for us to make the rent. It's way easier for us to make to make bills happen. And we have this, space that we love creating out of. And who knows how sustainable that is, because just like, anything, nothing good lasts. So it's really a fortunate position that I gotta, be thankful for and be prepared to, figure something else out when it's no longer that way. But for now, it's beautiful.
I mean, I think you can draw, quite a few parallels between being a producer with a space and, trying to get work, trying to make some records for people you may know, people you may not know, and also being a band, trying to get gigs, trying to go on tour, trying to build the fucking thing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've got some kind of expertise?
I mean, the only advice that I really follow is just do it, just whatever it is you got to get done, you got to get done. And it is funny because that is my struggle always, is like, if I took the studio really seriously, I think because of all the legs up that I have, I could really, make something successful out of it. And then we also have Slaughter Beach Dog, which is something else that's going incredibly well. And, I also love being on tour. I love playing music, especially with this group of people. And so it is, neither thing is easy to plan around. The schedules, I don't know if you remember when we did Posse, I got home from tour, I think a day or two before we started. And then we tracked for 3 days and then I left you with Joe for the last 4.
I remember.
Because I had to go off to tour again.
Yeah, we dropped you off. We were in the car, like in the back, like kids, whilst like someone gave us all a ride to this big CVS car park.
Yep.
And you got in one, and we don't have these in England, right? We don't.
No.
I haven't seen one anyway. Where you have these giant, what do you call them? Band trucks?
It's a bandwagon, and what it is essentially,
it looks like a Motorhead logo from the front.
It's a crazy thing. So basically, this company, I think they used to be a bus company or something, but they decided to make the most budget conscious vehicle that you could live in, and go on tour in, that they could. And it is a lot cheaper, and to the ounce and to the inch, it is just small enough that the driver doesn't need a commercial license, which honestly is terrifying, and definitely should need a commercial license to drive that thing. And the reality of what it is you live in a box truck, and it's incredibly nice to it's insane to have your own bed. Basically, your bunk is your own place that you could go to whenever you want. It's your own space, which, as you know, you never get on tour. And that's really, really valuable. But you also wake up 5-6 times in the middle of the night thinking, I can't see out right now. I can't see out a window right now. I could die. I might be dying at this moment. And basically you just get stoned enough that you try to sleep through the night as best as you can.
They're practically designed for Warped Tour, aren't they? I think that was the first time I became aware of it.
I think so, because we've gone on tour in the summer, and I know we had to reserve it extra early because they normally get booked out for Warped Tour.
We did this European tour once with Broadway Calls and Narwhals, and we had this van where like the sleeping bunk was above the loading bit at the back.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Not only that, but there was a massive trailer attached. There were 3 bands in this one van and trailer. And you just get into this bunk, and it's like, I don't know, 1.5 feet tall. So even getting into the thing is bad enough. You get in there and it's pitch black and it's snowing down the Autobahn.
Yeah. When you're in that spot, that like anything happens, you 100% will die. But you just surrender to it, whatever.
It's like taking off in an airplane where you're like, well, can't do anything now.
Totally.
It's awful. I mean, do you still, you said it earlier, and, I don't want to be rude or blunt or something, but you still rely on money, taking home money from Slaughter Beach Dog tours then?
Yeah. I mean, we have, we are incredibly fortunate enough that like, I don't, between that and Modern Baseball, I don't, Modern Baseball residuals or whatever, I don't need another job. I can make engineering and producing my job, even though I don't actually make any money from it. So it's liberating. And once again, Modern Baseball definitely gave us a leg up for the Slaughter Beach Dog, to be, in a position like that right off the bat, which, I'm incredibly grateful for. But also, every time we come to a city, there's more people there, and people buying records and stuff, which is incredible. I mean, it's kind of cliche to just like, to think about how much that stuff affects you, I guess, or to, talk about it at least, but it's really true how, fortunate we are to have that and to have people listening in the first place.
I think that's from my perspective, that's the awesome thing about Slaughter Beach Dog, is that the records are great. And it does kind of feel, it doesn't feel like a Modern Baseball side project. It feels like its own thing that's taken its own path. And maybe you're going to have to work for twice the amount of time to for those ticket stubs,
Yeah.
But it kind of suits that music as well, because I don't know if this is lazy of me, but it's so Wilco. And we all know the Wilco story.
Yeah, I mean, so we honestly discovered Wilco maybe 3 years ago. Like, we knew of them, we had heard them before, but I don't know if this is true for you, but for most people I know, it's like you hear Wilco and you're like, yeah, fine, whatever. Everybody loves Wilco. This is kind of good, but something about me bothers it. And then just something, a switch flips, and you're just like, holy shit, they're so on top of this. They're so good at what they do, and they obviously care so much. And then I start learning about the loft and everything and realize, oh, well, that's exactly what we're doing too, kind of.
Right. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not wrong.
I think they're my most debated about band when I'm at friends' houses.
Yeah.
I talk about, why, if you like them, do you like, it's like, and like Jeff Tweedy is so brilliant. Although I did start reading his autobiography, and it was boring. He was an interesting guy. I love his voice, and the way he makes records is amazing. And you are so right. I never thought about it like that. It takes that switch, doesn't it? And you're like, holy fucking shit, this is genius.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of the same thing with the Replacements too.
Yeah, definitely. Because so I think Stink was the first thing I heard, and like Kids Don't Follow is the one, and there's like isn't it amazing? And you're like, whoa, yeah. Are those real police officers telling those people to get out? You're like, this is awesome. And then you hear Tim and like Bastards of Young, obviously, whatever. But it's like, you listen to Tim and you're like, okay, I think this is going to take me a few goes. And then, I mean, for me, 10 years later, I'm finding new things about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild to like. It took me to absolutely fall in love with them the way that I have, where, I absolutely love that band through and through, and they're one of my favorite bands now. But it took probably 6 years no, actually more, because, I started listening to Stink and Sorry Ma back in, high school. So, a good like 10 years ago. And then from there, listening to Let It Be for the first time and being like, yeah, okay. And then Eric got obsessed with them and started listening to Tim all the time. And I was like, yeah, this record's cool. And then I saw them twice, and I got to see both sides of them. One of them was at Riot Fest. It was their second show back or whatever. And they were just professional as hell, which wasn't what I was expecting. But I was like, oh, cool. So they've like, they've grown up. They're taking it seriously. I mean, they've got studio musicians. They had Josh Freese on drums and somebody else on guitar. But then, I saw them again with Superchunk in Philly, and it was totally different. I mean, at one point, half the band played one song while half a band played another song. And then they did not go back. One of them was Androgynous. And then I can't remember what the other one was. It might have been Waitress in the Sky. They literally just fucked around.
Wow. How many years after was that from the Riot Fest comeback thing?
Honestly, it might have only been like 1 or 2 years. I think it was 1 or 2 years. Not long. I
saw them at one of the London ones. I think it was they played here in Paris. So they played in Paris, and then they did two London shows. And I think those were the last ones, or there was one after. But Paul Westerberg had coded a message, having a different letter on his shirt that spelled out whatever, said, see you later, thanks for the shoes, or whatever it was. Uh-huh. And it sounded great. They were so good. And Tommy Stinson, I was like, wow, I feel like this guy should be awful, but it's not.
Yeah, he's great.
Have you read the book?
I have not yet. I have plans to borrow it from Eric whenever. I have like a long list right now, because I go through phases where it's like I'm reading a ton of books and then I'm just like not. And right now I'm really backed up in the queue. But that is one of the next ones that I want to read. I got to read the Beastie Boys book. I actually, the Jeff Tweedy book's the next one on the table for me too. And I also the Keith Richards book, Life.
Nice. Well, I hope I haven't done the Jeff Tweedy book a disservice by saying it was boring.
Oh, no, I'm sure there's, the thing that I've realized, because I love I love the autobiographies, just the same way that I love listening to interviews with all of my favorite creative people of all sorts. no matter whether you like them or not, no matter whether you agree with them or not, you always take away something important, even if it's just like, they do all of these things terribly, but that thing they do is kind of cool. Even like I was reading an interview with Mike Love, who I can't stand. I love the Beach Boys, but like everybody else, cannot stand Mike Love. But just hearing him talk about how he meditates every morning, it was like, that's inspiring, and that makes me want to meditate. I don't want to take anything else away from this guy because he's a fucking asshole, but that's one little piece of information that I can, use.
I think it's such a it's such like the wrong of privilege now that we can turn down something so quickly. I was reading that thing about, forget who was an interview with it, but I forget who it was an interview with, but it was like, if you go out and buy a CD for 12 quid, which would be $15 for you, when we were 15, or 13, you would sit with it until you liked it.
Yeah, it's true. I honestly, I did that a lot, and those are the records that you end up loving.
Yeah.
I waited for a long time. I had been very excited for Spotify to come to the US for like 3 or 4 years. That was like all I wanted, because as a music head, you're just constantly trying to discover more and more. And I was scared out of downloading things online by my parents, because my parents are actually both lawyers, and my dad had me terrified that if I got caught, they would both lose their jobs, and then we would be homeless.
Wow.
I never got on that train. So I was always, when I had no money growing up, I would take whatever money that I had, because I didn't have a job. Like I would go to the record store, and I would go to the used CD bin, and then I would buy whatever was cheapest from the bands that I had heard about that I wanted to check out. And I remember one of the records specifically that got me that way, that to this day I still absolutely love, is the Mars Volta's Bedlam and Goliath.
Oh wow. That was too heavy for me. That was too much.
Well, that was my introduction to the band, because I had just heard of them. I think I had heard one song that I liked that was off Francis the Mute. And I put it on and was just like, I am so uncomfortable, I'm turning this off. And then 6-7 months later, I put it on again and said, still no. But there was that determination in me, and finally, like, it took kind of 2 years of that, and then I finally put it on and was like, dude, this is genius. I love this. And then I went out and bought other records and got super into the band. And it's that way with so many other bands that I don't think I would have really given the time of day with now. And once I did start, then I did a little bit of like Mediafire and stuff when I finally left home, and I had Spotify. And between those two things, I started to expand my knowledge so much of all this music, but I found that I would listen to a record once and then feel like I'd listened to it and just be on to the next thing. So I had to make a very conscious effort that took a few years to get myself in the habit of, where if I like something, I'm just going to keep listening to it.
I sometimes wonder, like, we're I guess punk rockers perhaps, or like,
yeah,
I wonder if that, the kid that gave me the Rancid self-titled, or I think it was Let's Go actually, if that kid instead of giving me like a Trivium CD, I'd be just well into metal right now. I think that's true for anyone.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, but also, I think the energy and the attitude that comes out of punk also, I mean, I can't really speak for you, Giles, but I know you well enough to know that you probably would have gravitated towards it at some point. And that's what happened to me, because, like, I mean, you say that about Trivium. I was obsessed with Tool in high school.
Oh, great.
But at the same time, I was obsessed with Minor Threat and, Black Flag. So it is funny. Music is music, and you gravitate towards what resonates with you. With the internet, there's so much available that you can literally consume everything. But it is more meaningful when someone gives you something personally, and that can change your life.
Growing up and dumpster diving into the budget bin. How keen were you on trying to get a job to do with music? Had you thought about that at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think I knew pretty early on that I wanted to be like, I was interested in creativity. It started with music. My parents first gave me like Beatles records and bought me Beatles CDs when I was like 5 years old, and I became obsessed with them. And then I wanted to start playing music, so my parents, got me piano lessons at like first grade. That didn't really, like, I did it for 5 years, but then I, started playing guitar, and I put piano away for 10 years and don't really have much of it anymore. But from that moment that I first started playing piano, I felt like that was kind of my identity. And then somewhere around like 12 to 14, I got super into video. And now all of a sudden I was super inspired, and I was like, okay, I want to be a film director. Where before it's funny now, but basically since I was like 10, all I wanted to do was own a recording studio.
Wow.
And, here I am. And with video, all it took was one terrible video teacher who made me feel awful about it to make me go, okay, maybe video is not right for me, but I still love music. I'm going to keep pursuing this. And I never thought that I would be, like playing in any sort of successful way. Because I've been playing, guitar and bass since I was like 10. But I was incredibly antisocial and a huge introvert, and I didn't know anybody else in school who listened to the same things that I did until, maybe like the year before I graduated, when I reconnected with some old friends who, had started a band. But so I never thought that I would be playing in a band with other people. My focus was always like, I want to be kind of behind the scenes. I want to, I'm interested in the creation of everything.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you played piano, because that sparks in me, like, I mean, obviously you're playing guitar and bass at the same time, but I think that playing piano, it informs your bass playing so much, right?
It kind of everything. It's, even though I never I don't really play it nearly as much as, any other instrument that I play. I just every once in a while when a thing needs a part, I bust it out and do my best. But the way that I think about music, the way that I think about, harmonies and stuff like that, it all comes from the piano. Just the movement of everything. That's because that's how I learned notes worked. So whenever I hear notes, it's very easy to envision it as keys on a piano.
That's fascinating. That's mind-boggling to me. Because when you see someone play piano, it looks, undoable.
Oh my God. Especially the people who are actually good at it. Like, I'm nowhere near that. I can play some chords and I know what those notes are and what those chords are, but
yeah,
the people who could put feeling into
it's
it,
like dancing, isn't it?
Oh my God, yeah. It makes you want to dance too, because you got percussion elements, you've got melody, you've got harmony, you have everything in a piano.
You don't need anything else, do you? Really?
You honestly don't. It takes up the full spectrum. Obviously, yeah, you can play other things with it too, and it sounds wonderful, but it covers pretty much all the bases. And I kick myself every day for, putting it away and not keeping up with it.
Everyone says it. Everyone says that about piano, don't
It's
they?
true. It's true.
We're jumping around here, but fuck it, this is my podcast. When you went to uni or when you went to college, was it Temple in Philly? Or was it the other one?
It was Drexel.
Drexel.
Yeah.
When you started there, were you obviously modern baseball had yet to start. You were unaware that this thing was going to take you on a ride. Did you have plans of kind of what you were going to do for work in the summer?
So, yeah, it's funny. I mean, as far as what I was going to do for work in the summer, I did not know because, to be entirely honest, I grew up, pretty privileged, and knowing it and being, my parents made sure that I knew that I was and I was grateful for it, that I didn't need to get a job in high school. And then, reality kind of hit after my first year in Drexel, where it's like, oh shit, I've got $8. Luckily I'm still fortunate enough to have, my parents' house that I can stay in and my parents' food that I can eat. So really I can live, but I can't do anything that I want to do. I actually had to miss the first Modern Baseball tour, and Ben still played bass. One, because then we didn't have to cram an extra person into the van when there were only 7 seats. So we would have had 8 people in there. But 2, I needed money. So I had to go home, and I found a job working at a warehouse for, school books, basically. It was fucking boring. Like, especially when I was watching all my friends, they're going out on their first tour, which was like 5 days. I even went to like 1 or 2 of the shows. But I didn't get to play, even though I was just starting to play with this band, and like I didn't get to hang out, the way that they did. And then even like like shows that were happening in Philly, I had to miss out on because I was in New Jersey working at this warehouse, whatever. And but all in all, I got paid shit. I got paid minimum wage for sure. And I remember like I even had like a talking to about coming in too tired because I would like stay up all night, and I was like, I'm doing my job. Like, what's up with, like, how are you able to criticize me for this? But all in all, it could have been worse. I wasn't really put in harm's way, and it wasn't all that difficult. It was just boring as all hell.
Yeah.
And it was a job.
Going back to your hometown after your first semester of uni must have been pretty hard.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, and I can say that I do not like New Jersey. So that aspect of it wasn't so great either.
So you must have remembered when Modern Baseball first came back from tour with money.
That first tour, they came back in the black, I guess is the term. It wasn't much, but they went out for 5 days, and after gas was paid for, they had $100. And for that being your first tour, that's good. Pretty fucking amazing. Yeah. And from there it only went up and up and up.
Yeah. I mean, that with that money intake, there must have been a responsibility to it gets to a point where you can't just like keep the cash in the fucking, glove compartment anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, that's also kind of where, Eric came in, because, from the beginning we had a manager, which is really funny now thinking about, we were a DIY band with a manager from day one.
But he was your best friend, and that's why I think
exactly
it's funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something to look up to, really.
It's really funny. And I mean, it kickstarted him a whole career in, managing other bands and stuff now. Now he's managing Sydney Gish, and he manages Slaughter Beach Dog too, as well as still, handling all the Mobo stuff that, so we don't have to hear about it.
How do you guys feel about like if you're like out for a few beers, if someone brings up modern baseball, are you a bit like, oh, shut up?
In some ways, I mean, it's funny because yes, a lot of the time, and I don't really know why, other than I just like I don't know what to say. I don't know what to talk about it. You're not going to tell me anything that I don't know already, and I don't know what I can, help you with. But yeah, it's one of those funny things. I think when you become a part of something, when you're hype on it, you really want to talk about it. And when you're not, even if it's just like, yeah, it's cool, you don't really want to talk about it.
I completely understand.
But
I can completely understand.
Yeah.
It can kind of be the best thing and the worst thing in my experience.
Yeah. And sometimes it's really cool, but also when it happened to the max, like at modern baseball's height, it was entirely insane, just like walking down the street and somebody would notice me and would come over and say hi. And it was honestly usually better when they wanted to talk, but like I don't know, it was a weird thing. I'm not the kind of person that loves attention like that, so it was tough to wrangle with on that side too, and made it almost a little bit of like like I was embarrassed a little bit, which I never understand and still don't. I get it making me uncomfortable, but yeah, I think there's still just weird embarrassment about being a part of something that went really well, and especially after, making it go away.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm not trying to be some kind of therapist here, but like, you couldn't have even controlled it anyway.
Totally. I mean, that's entirely true. You just can't. You feel what you feel.
Yeah. Well, it's been so amazing. Like, I'm definitely not the only one. I've spoken to a lot of friends about it. How it's such a brilliant journey to see you and Jake doing Slaughter Beach Dog. It's like a book, I would say. You know what I mean? It's like a next chapter. And I know that's such a stereotypical thing to say, but Jake's lyrics and the turns of phrases, and it being something that it clicks. You know what I mean? It clicks, and Jake's lyrics are amazing, and hearing you play music together is wicked.
Thank you, Giles.
And it sounds great as well.
Yeah, you want to know a secret?
Go on.
Jake did it all himself because we're all quarantined. We can't get together, so he did an excellent job. I think it definitely humbled me to hear that and go, wow, yep, this guy can do it all on his own.
So people who are going to want to record at the Metal Shop, when you think about projects that you want to work on in the future, what are the elements of the things that excite you most?
I mean, the thing that excites me the most is when somebody else is excited about what they're doing. Like when somebody else is as excited about the creative process as I am, that is the most, fun and beautiful thing to me, making a record. Because I think that's really what makes records good is, it's not going to be good if you don't care. And then it also, there's just that it factor that some records have and some don't. But I don't know, it drive, just, people loving what they're doing. That's, I feel like I'm babbling like an idiot.
No, I know. I completely understand, because I actually think I think of, records that I've made that I'm like, why did that record have that particular feeling? Like, what is it that made it? I'm not sure. And I think, when you walk into a studio, whether you want to admit it or not, you kind of want things just right, because you want to make that record that's so special in a way that you can't really understand, but you don't know how to do that,
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely true. And I don't know if it's been apparent to people listening, but I actually have pretty strong ADHD. But what I've found to be a strength of the ADHD is that I do have this ability to hyper focus on something when I want to, when I'm really into it. If I'm not into it, I cannot focus. But, I can I feel like I have this mode that I go into where it's like, I can see everything about this one thing, and really just hone in on it. And that's fun.
Yeah, I mean, at least you know, presumably when you got something good, you'll know it, right? Because you feel good.
Yeah.
Amazing. Ian, thanks so much for chatting to me about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I realize it's a podcast about part-time jobs, but what I have realized is it's a wider discussion about everyone's journey. And that's what makes life beautiful.
Life is beautiful. I mean, it's just life is beautiful. It can be really tough to remember that, and it can be really tough to see it at times, especially at a time like right now when it seems like the world's just so fucked beyond repair. But you just have to remember that, I mean, we got to work for it, but it's also just a wave that's passing. And once again, you know, there will be a time again when you can look at the world and realize life is beautiful.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to wait for it. Sometimes you got to wait for that, you know, and so much of the time it's actually comes from somewhere. Your bad feelings come from somewhere inside of you, but so do your good feelings.
Yeah. You know, actually, I'll say this because I think that it could be really helpful for a lot of people too. But, you know, about a month or two ago, we had the Sauter Beach Dog van stolen, and then maybe less than 2 weeks later, I had the catalytic converter stolen off of my car, which was incredibly expensive to repair. And in that moment, I was feeling, you know, like I was struggling super hard because it's like, well, why did these people do it? This is an incredibly desperate time for a lot of people. You know, I just kind of have to hold the feeling of like, you know, I'm upset with this, and also hold this feeling of, I hope they got what they needed. But that was incredibly stressful, and it became too much, you know, just too much feeling. And I was starting to slip into a depression, and my therapist gave me this, you know, I guess it's a metaphor, where we're all just looking for the next breadcrumb in the trail, and you never know what it will be, and you never know when it's going to come, but you know there's going to be another breadcrumb. So you just have to keep your eyes open for it.
What lovely advice to end on there. Thank you to Ian for coming on the show. Thank you for listening to it. If you haven't already thought about what voice note you're going to leave to a friend recommending 101 part-time jobs, then I highly recommend you get on that if you want to be on a future show. Again, could go horribly wrong. Let's find out. Cheers again for listening. Wherever you're listening to your podcast, please go ahead and rate and review it. For every review to give to this show, you'll find a Lotus biscuit on your pillow. This episode was edited by Sophie Porter. Cheers, Sophie.
I've been working all day for me mate on the side, running around like a blue-ass fly. I've been working all day for me mate. Every bleeding minute I've been on the go, up and down the ladder like a fiddler's elbow. I've been working all day for me mate.
This is a Mighty Moon Media podcast.